Hello and a very good afternoon to everyone. I am Basundhara from Logistics Insider and I welcome you all to our very special LinkedIn Live event, Indian Air Cargo Gathering Steam, powered by Jeena and Company. The once dethroned air cargo industry is slowly rising from the ashes. The coronavirus mayhem may have certainly battered this thriving industry, but apart from gradually getting back on its feet, India's air cargo sector has delivered beyond expectations in catering to the call of the nation in its time of need. Major factors now await to force a transformation in the industry as it takes on the tumultuous responsibility of facilitating the transport of the approved COVID vaccines while recuperating from the crisis of the bygone year, be it the impact of the pandemic or the ripple effect created due to the container shortage and the ocean freight problem. As government policies and initiatives write a new growth story for the recuperating sector, salient factors like technology, rising freighter movements, and e-commerce may emerge as formidable forces in enabling the sector to charter new growth trajectories. To offer more insights on what lies ahead for the sector, we have with us today a distinguished panel of speakers for the show. Introducing our speakers for today's event, we have with us Mr. Cyrus Katgara, President at ACFI. Hello, sir.
Hi, Siddharth.
Uh, Mr. Saurabh Kumar, CEO at GMR Hyderabad Air Cargo.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir. Willy Boulter, CCO at IndiGo, InterGlobe Aviation Limited.
Hi, good afternoon to everyone. Great to be here.
Good afternoon, sir. Abhay Pathak, Air Cargo Expert and former Executive Director Cargo at Air India.
Good afternoon to all of you.
And Mr. Prediman Koul, Executive Director and Board Member at Jeena and Koul, who will be moderating today's session as well.
Good afternoon, everybody.
So, before we commence, a note to our viewers that we'll also be taking questions during the show. So, please feel free to put in your questions for the speakers in the comment section below, which we will be taking up towards the end of the show. I would now hand over the reins of the show to Mr. Prediman Koul as I look forward to an enriching and engaging discussion ahead.
Thank you, Basundhara, for this lovely introduction of the esteemed panelists. So, if I may say, I'm happy to moderate the session, the kind of industry experts we have today with us, and also the theme of the show. At last 10, 11 months, we have been only organizing or connecting to the shows which were mostly on the problems we have been facing right from the pandemic hit us. So today something, the theme air cargo market gathering the steam, so something positive and very music to all of us in our ears that I'm sure our connected colleagues from the industry must be also having the same thought. So let us take it forward with that positive note. But it's very important to also see what happened in last 10 months or so, when suddenly March last week we saw lockdowns happening, other restrictions, all of us know. But at the same time, when we were thinking everything is on the standstill, but the industry gathered together, created synergy. We saw the customs coming out with a lot of notifications immediately and creating the paperless assessments, contactless assessments. Same way, airlines putting in the capacity in shape of the cargo freighters or converted cargo aircrafts. We saw airports making sure that there is a protocol adopted, which was required as per the government guidelines. We saw freight forwarders, CHAs coming to the airports and making sure clearances are happening. Cargo is taken out, it is delivered. There was a lot of challenges on the truck movements. Even if cargo is cleared, it was not moving out. Trucks were not available, drivers were not available. But the industry actually made it possible, and we ensured that supply chain is not stopped, especially when it was very critical when India was importing the PPE kits, masks, and other related critical equipment. So that's a really good to see how we responded. So with that note, I think this would be apt to ask first question to ACFI President Mr. Cyrus Katgara, that when all this was happening and ACFI being the industry body, what was the response to the pandemic from ACFI side when it comes to understanding the issues industry was facing, then possible solutions, reaching out to concerned government bodies and departments to facilitate the trade and make the synergies possible? Mr. Katgara, over to you, please.
Mr. Koul, it's a very long question to answer, and I'll try to be as brief as possible. I think the theme that we have also selected, air cargo market gatherings team, could not be more appropriate at this time of the year. And after almost 1 year of COVID, for sure this is on the uptake. There is no doubt that air cargo is not going to boom. The government, let's put it this way, the government has been very, very supportive. They really moved heaven and earth for a democracy like India. So many hundreds of millions of people have to be served with this vaccine, taking care of them. I mean, there's so much said in the press and all over the TV, all over the news. The government has done a fabulous job. I'm not making a political statement. I'm not a politician, but we have to give the due the way the people have handled the situation. They at the ground level, airports also rose to the occasion. They created extra space for the vaccines. They introduced the PPE kits. They did so many things. All the airports have done in providing cold storage and additional capacity. Airlines again, Air India has definitely taken the lead on the international front. They've taken special flights, brought back people, carried so much cargo all around the place. ACFI was, in a way, coordinating between a lot of these organizations. We made so many presentations, we had so many interactions with Civil Aviation Ministry and coordinated all the stakeholders, whether it was the Airport Authority, ACLC, Mr. I must say, Kerku Gazdar. His room was like a pilot uh, controlling all the movement of cargo. And they did work very hard on this whole issue. A lot of information was given to the public how to handle vaccines, what to do. It was new to everybody. No one knew how to do it. But humans are such good innovation. We all, the world rose to the occasion. We created SOPs, we created everything, how to handle vaccines. A vaccine from minus 70 degrees to plus 8 degrees. Look at the variation, look at the handling, look at the expertise required to handle such kind of business. It is so easy for a general public who's going to get the vaccine on the ground. He's going to get the vaccine, but the whole picture, how to create and get these vaccines to every corner of the country, man, this is the greatest logistics movement it's going to ever happen in the history of mankind. And I hope it doesn't happen again also. So we don't want this to happen again, but it is there. And well, I will leave it to my next panelist for the next question. PK, I hope I've answered it in a broad way.
Thank you, Mr. Katgara. Absolutely. So I go to Mr. William and welcome again Mr. William on the panel. So we understand currently you are associated with one of the largest passenger aircrafts, but your previous experience about the cargo is very, very important for us to take advantage out of that and listen to you and your expert views on the air cargo. So we have seen that after the COVID, there were a lot of shift of the commodities. So a lot of high volume commodities which used to normally go on the air freight, they were not there, maybe because of the demand or other reasons we all know. So which were the key commodities which actually created the demand on the air freight side? And airlines could really put some load factors on the aircrafts and airports, and forwarders like us, we were able to do some air freight business. And second related question with the same, as I said, one of the very important commodities for air freight was fashion and retail. So when do you see that coming back to the air freight side? Please go ahead, Mr. Willy.
Sure. Well, first of all, just to say it's great to be part of this panel, and thank you very much indeed to Logistics Insider for the invitation. I think, I mean, what people have to understand probably about the cargo market, the air cargo market since COVID is, what happened was all the belly space, as the industry insiders know, but many don't appreciate perhaps, all the belly space disappeared fundamentally because passenger airplanes were not flying. And, this has put a lot of pressure on the freighter fleet and so on, and indeed pushed airlines like us to start flying passenger aircraft with cargo in cabin. And I agree with Mr. Katgara's comments. The government has been very flexible and has been very helpful in approving cargo in cabin charters, which we've undertaken. In terms of the commodities, obviously, there was a fall off in economic activity. So traditional commodities such as auto parts went through, a big decline in those months after the pandemic hit, and were replaced obviously by the PPE, the necessity to transport huge volumes in the early days of PPE equipment for the medical facilities, and of course everyone else to use. I mean, running an airline these days, you have to have a budget for PPE for your cabin crew, for instance. So the commodities changed a little bit, for sure, and it also put pressure because of the lack of freighter capacity and the lack of belly space. We found ourselves, for instance, shipping perishables in the belly and in the cabin from South India into the Gulf, which was a new market for us. And indeed, we started shipping similar perishables from South India into Singapore and into other Southeast Asian nations. So, there has been quite a change. But I think, we're now seeing things stabilize again. And I'm sure people will have seen the recent figures about the number of cars sold and so on in India, the number of new registrations. The auto manufacturer is coming back, perhaps, electronics coming back and so on. So, I'm still, very optimistic. I mean, you ask about the fashion and retail side. And clearly, that's been through a big downturn. And to me, it's a little bit hazy as to what the future development will be there, because I think what we've seen is some production has moved out of China into Vietnam. India should be a beneficiary as well of that move of production, I think, or move of sourcing of retail and fashion items. So let's see. Again, I have to be optimistic. I think we're all optimistic in the cargo world, and hopefully that side of it will come back. But it's very different from what it used to be when I was here in the 80s in India, working in India, where we had huge amounts of leather export and so on, and I don't see that being as dominant now as it used to be. But I'm not a fashion expert, but obviously we hope that it will recover. Whilst understanding, countries like Bangladesh and Vietnam to an extent seem to have an edge in terms of producing fashion and retail. But those would be my comments on the commodity splits and so on.
Thank you, Mr. William. Very, very useful for all of us regarding the commodities which changed and now the commodities which are gathering the steam. Thank you so much for that. So with that, I request Mr. Pathak to dwell on. So today we are seeing in, I think, most of the parts of the world and India, that sea freight is having a lot of challenges when it comes to the inventory of containers, and there are congestions happening in certain ports, which is also creating a extended dwell time for the freight to reach to the destination. So, do you see, Mr. Pathak, some of the cargo shifting to the air mode? And if yes, are airlines ready to handle that kind of cargo movement coming in from the sea mode to air mode? And down the line, say short term, middle term, what do you see would be this advantage to the air side? Please go ahead, Mr. Pathak.
Well, now we have to see that first of all, foremost, the category of the product which goes on the by air and by sea. The ocean freight category is totally different, and by air is totally different. But there are some products which are mixed, which can use by both ocean and air freight both. So largely, the ocean freight for the all agriculture products like crops, the your rice, your engineering materials. Certainly, that pharma also goes on that. The export has gone up by 20% during that period, and the import has gone down by almost 18% now, 20% down. And the mismatch took the place where the ULD, so-called the containers, was less available. And the ocean freight was not in position to cope up the demand of the extra 20% growth, especially the pharma and the rice export. So that has given a real little band on that. But the two things has emerged because of that. One is the freight has gone many folds. Uh, and I will not hesitate to put it, the shipping line also use this opportunity by increasing the freight. So there was some period there was artificial, uh, you know, shortage also, but there was a delay in the part of only the movement. But as such, if you say that it was deviated or it has shifted to by air, it's a very less commodities, only pharma, because these ocean freight and by air freight is a huge difference of the cost, and the cost has to be borne by the buyer or by the supplier, and they were not in position to do so because all of us are committed. Initially, they were committed, all order was already in place, price was already fixed, so that a little blunt has or little shift has taken a place by air only by pharma, nothing else. So this is the total scenario. Uh, but as Mr. William has said already, belly space is the most important because it becomes when you fly the passengers aircraft, the belly space become a byproduct, and the cost is very less for the cargo, or rather hardly any cost because whatever you earn, it's a bonus or rather revenue or total profit. Whereas when you operate exclusively for only for the cargo, you take the both side load and the both side operation cost, and then that is the reason the air freight has also gone into 3 to 4 fold or 5 fold, and now its market is still not ready to accept this kind of the rate of freight, and sooner or later this will hit in the market in the export market from the market, where the cost or the price for Indian commodity will be little higher. That is my take on this.
Thank you, Mr. Pathak. Now we are very clear that you are not only air freight expert, you are ocean freight expert also. The kind of depth understanding you have there. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
So now may I request Mr. Saurabh Kumar to dwell on the point. Mr. Katgara mentioned about the vaccines. So if we take it forward with you, so keeping in view the population of India, we need huge number of doses to make sure everybody is vaccinated. So do you see the airports, airlines, and related infrastructure, we are ready to do so? And how do you see that we, if not ready, we are preparing for that down the line so that we are coping up with the requirements. Over to you, Mr. Saurabh Kumar.
Yeah, thanks, PK. It's a very relevant question. In fact, you have touched upon how the air cargo is going to support the vaccination drive for the entire population of the country. In fact, in the previous question which you gave to Mr. Abhay Pathak, I was eagerly listening to see if he says that a big chunk of sea freight is going to move to air cargo. But I think I take a point that they are two separate commodities, so it's not going to happen so easily. And I fully agree to it, but I was still hopeful of some insights which I'm not aware of. But that's what I like. Coming to vaccine, see, India has about a population of 140 crores, about 1400 million. And we all know that we are talking about two series of vaccination, two doses of vaccination per person. So we are talking about a logistics setup to handle about 2,800 to say at most say about 3,000 million dosages of vaccine. Now this is a huge number. 3,000 million dosages of vaccine has never been moved, has never been planned via logistics either by air or by road in a short period of say defined period of say 1 year or whatever plan that we have, 1 year, 1.5 years. But that's one side of the story. If you're talking about the question, are airports or are the air cargo stakeholder, are the air freight forwarder and agents ready? I think the answer is very clear. Yes, they are all ready. Yes, in fact, they're not ready. They have also started delivering. And I think Cyrus he touched upon the subject that starting last month, almost all the airports, all the major airports in the country have started handling domestic and international, both inbound and outbound vaccine. And there is a very close coordination that's happening on a real-time basis. Real time in the sense I see it with my eyes. Within 4 minutes, the vaccine passes through our facility. It is delivered to another cold facility. And the aircrafts are coming on time. Their schedules are being monitored. Both SpiceJet, IndiGo, and all the other domestic airlines have been involved in this first phase of vaccine distribution. As we are speaking, about 20 million dosages have been, distributed domestically, and about a few million, maybe say 4 to 6 million dosages have also been distributed to various countries as an export cargo from India. Most of them are in free countries, and also there are countries such as Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Brazil, all of these countries. I just gave names, Maldives as well. Few names. If somebody needs to understand the subject in detail, there are two factors that we should have an idea. What would be the weight of these vaccines? I know if we all try to convert the weight of the boxes into the metric tons of cargo, I think most of us will be surprised that we are talking about anywhere between 10,000 metric tons of cargo, of vaccine cargo for meeting the requirements of the Indian population. When I'm giving you, an estimate of about 10,000 metric tons, I'm talking about those 3,000 million dosages that we are talking about. So where does this 10,000 metric ton stands? If you see, it doesn't even stand as 1% of the air cargo that all of us are handling, not even 1%. And if I look at how much is the daily cargo IndiGo is handling in its 600, 500 departures, I don't want William to answer that question. So it's a small proportion, but the key thing is that all of them are 2 to 8 degrees. All of them have to maintain that temperature more or less all through their journey, and that's where the crux happens. So in India, we have 100 airports and we have another 100 airfields. But if the question is, are all those 100 airports or 100 plus airfields ready for full? The answer is no. But the key crux is that the entire logistics runs on hub and spoke. There are certain airports which are hub airports, which needs to distribute or which needs to receive or which needs to export and import. Largely, Hyderabad, Delhi, Pune, Mumbai, centered around these four airports. In terms of handling multiple, for give you an example, in the first round, Pune handled about 30 to 40 destinations. Hyderabad handled about similar number of destinations. And so is Delhi and Bombay. So these airports are fully equipped, absolutely fully equipped. And I'll give you an estimate. And I'll just give you an example from Hyderabad, and this remains valid more or less in the 2, 3 major airports that I talked about. But for Pune, because it's not a mainline airport, it's valid both for Delhi and Bombay. So in Hyderabad, the capacity for handling 2 to 8 cargo, roughly we can handle about 200 tons of cargo in a day. 200 tons of 2 to 8 cargo. Now, in anticipation of the fact that these vaccines are coming, over the period of last 3 to 4 months, the capacity has been realigned and augmented. Yes, we had various temperature. We had 15 to 25. We had too much of -20. So the capacities are realigned to make sure that the vaccine capacity is maximized. And if you convert this metric ton, it's into the number of doses. We are talking about 50 million dosages. 50 million dosages per day only from Hyderabad, obviously, which is among the biggest center for vaccine handling in the country. So it's clear that as an air cargo, the airports, the airlines, the freight forward community, the regulator, and the government, all of them are very well aware of what it requires to transport this, and we are all ready. And in doing so, finally, one more point I wanted to highlight: the significance of packaging. Each of the vaccine comes with a packaging that ensures certain hours of durability in terms of temperature range. Typically, it varies from 24 hours to 36 hours. And that is something which is helping all of us work together and deliver in our respective areas. So airline doesn't need to go to handle those boxes within their belly as well. So that's where we are. I'm just giving you an overview on the entire air logistics. It's going to play a very major role, and we are all ready. It's not a big thing that we cannot overcome.
I have.
Thank you so much, Saurabh. Yes, Mr. Pathak, please.
The quantum which we are predicting by air will be very less because of the cost factor is very important. By air and by road, it's a 5 times to 7 times cost. Second is the logistic also, because you have to transport from the factory to the airport. And I wonder that most of the airports do not have the Koul dolly, and that is the big issue. Second is the most of the domestic operation is the belly of so and the temperature is going to be an issue because at the moment we are in winter, especially in the northwest. But once the summer starts, it will be an issue of handling with this vaccination. I do not know how much if the airport is ready with the dollies and other because if in the transportation from your warehouse to the aircraft, that's most important. When you have 40-degree temperature at the tarmac, how are you going to do that? Because I don't know whether who is having a. I think it's only one Koul dolly is in Delhi and rest are in. So that needs to be addressed.
Indeed. Thank you, Mr. Saurabh, Mr. Pathak, for that very critical input. So the takeaway would be that it's not about the volume or the tons. It's about the criticality of the temperature, criticality of the time, and criticality of handling at the airport. How we ensure it's not exposed to the temperature levels, which can harm the final efficacy of the vaccine. So thank you for those inputs. So I go back to Mr. Katgara. I'm sure personally also Mr. Katgara is very passionate about the digitalization. So ACFI being a body of all of us, all the organizations. So we have seen that digitalization has been a buzz even before the COVID hit us. There were a lot of initiatives already taken for the industry. But the litmus test came when we saw it was because of the adoption of the digitalization, industry could really work. Almost everybody was working from home. The assessments were taken place without anybody going there. There were no physical documents. So how is ACFI viewing this implementation? and how ACFI is creating the awareness and facilitating industry on the digitalization front. Over to you, Mr. Katgara.
I would say when you talk of ACFI, it's a full industry move. It's not going. It's just not ACFI or its members. The whole industry has moved. I would like to really compliment. Actually, again, customs. They went miles ahead in going digitalization. They embraced the technology. What the dream came true. We were expecting many years back. It just happened overnight. And we talked of digitalization. We last 20 years we are trying to do the same thing over and over again. We just can't get rid of paper. Somehow it is even today. Sometimes I just go mad when I see so much paper around. Sorry to make this statement, but it is yet true. Digitalization has put us completely, I think, 5 years ahead. This one thing COVID brought good to the whole industry was getting rid of paper and getting massive rid of paper. We have just straight jumped 5 years ahead, I would say, by this whole embracing of digital technology. The airlines have beautifully accepted it, airports, customs, and everyone who wants to go. People are working from home. How do you work from home if it's not digitalized? So it is a new era we are entering, and it's going to be a great experience for the future generations. Digitalization, without digitalization, I cannot see any other company surviving. Today you also order. Can you imagine 2 years back? I want to order food every day at home. Without digitalization, would never happen. Today you're ordering food, you're ordering shoes, you're ordering anything you want, gardening equipment, whatever it is there for you. So digitalization has really taken a big step. We cannot do without digitalization in the future. I think everyone on the panel would agree. Actually, our panel, I was just calculating, there are more than 120 years of experience put together. So we have a great panel here. And it reminds me of Jeena also. I just want to say a little thing. Jeena is also now 120 years in operation. Only thing that Saurabh has brought our age down.
So I'm quite.
Saurabh, you have brought, but you made a great. I must compliment. Actually, Hyderabad Airport had taken the lead, and I'm not saying this, but I just saw he's so active in ACFI, and they gave such a lot of input on how handling of vaccine and shared their Hyderabad Airport shared their experiences with other airports around the country. And thank you, Saurabh, you and your team for making such good presentations in the past. That has educated the whole industry also. PK, I'll leave it for the next question for the other panelists. I hope I've answered that too.
Thank you so much for that, sir. So from digitalization to e-commerce. So my this discussion point is with Mr. William. So we have seen e-commerce now growing with a very rapid percentages year on year, especially during the pandemic. I think most of us, whatever we had to purchase was through the net only. And tier 2, tier 3 cities of India are also actually contributing to the overall growth of e-commerce in India. So how do you see it helping to the domestic airlines, especially for a middle term and long term? Over to you, Mr. William.
Sure. Well, I mean, we've obviously been a beneficiary of the growth in e-commerce to an extent. But actually, I would just put in a note of caution. I think that, I've been in the industry a long time, and, there tend to be these fads or these new things come along, and everyone thinks they're going to be the savior of the air freight industry. And indeed, we've seen that with the vaccines recently. And I think Saurabh's explanation was a very good one. In terms of metric tonnage, it's not a huge amount of business, the vaccine. I mean, it's 10,000 tons, let's say. I mean, our estimates showed about 7,000. I think the Serum Institute came up with their own estimate of around 7,000 to inoculate the whole of India. And it's significant business, but it's it's at the end of the day, it's as Saurabh mentions, it's not about the volume of it. It's about the handling, and there can be no more important initiative, for mankind than to make sure that these vaccines are sent out in the right conditions. So I'm not downplaying it at all, but what I'm saying is that sometimes the tonnage is not quite what you think, and I would say even with e-commerce, everybody has to understand that these e-commerce players, if they can, they want to ship their stuff by road, because it's a lot cheaper. And actually a vast amount of e-commerce, the biggest amount goes by road, not by air. Yeah. And in the air freight business, we get, I don't know, but, it varies according to who you speak to, but maybe we get 10, 15%, maybe even less of the inventory of the e-commerce sales. And of course we get more around Diwali and when they're having their promotional periods. And of course we get, the shipments that customers pay to get quicker. We get some of that. I'm trying to avoid using any of the brand names, right? We all know, who I'm talking about. But so, there's definitely, it's been a good thing for the air freight industry, but let's temper it by saying it's not going to totally change the air freight industry in my view, because at the end of the day, these guys, they want to save money. They're going to send their stuff by road, and as we've seen in India, certainly in many parts of India, the highway system's a lot better than it was decades ago, and they can use road transportation very easily, and they're building centers around the country, warehousing centers, distribution centers, to allow them to do that. So air freight, I'm confident, will be important, and you've seen some of these companies take quite large air fleets in other parts of the world, in North America and Europe. So I've no doubt that it will be a significant player in the air freight business. But again, just remember that ultimately they would prefer to send most of their stuff up by road.
Thank you, Mr. William.
Because the cost is very
Mr. Pathak, you want to say?
Yeah, I'm just saying the cost is a very important factor. Most of e-commerce, when they started a business with the one USP, speed delivery. But what they did, they segmented it further, and now they come out with express. So for express, if your customer is ready to pay money for by air, then they do. And most of the customers, they shift to by road. So that is why the shift is taking a place. So the airlines has to think about it, how to compete with the cost with by air vis-a-vis to by road. That's the most important.
Yeah, but I do think that e-commerce to some extent it will compete with other commodities that we can take. I mean, of course, it all depends on demand and supply, specific lanes, specific routes. You can't predict it, but they will be competing with the traditional sort of express courier type business. They'll be competing potentially with other seasonal perishables, whatever it might be, on certain lanes. So, I mean, of course, they're going to negotiate hard, and of course, they want cheap prices for air freight, and they want to bring it closer to other modes. But I think in the air freight industry, we've got to sort of sell our space for a reasonable return. And the worst thing we can do is sort of trash the yields yet again.
Thank you for that input. Very, very important and valid. So I'm now requesting Mr. Pathak to dwell on a point. You see, we have heard a lot of initiatives after the pandemic, which India as a whole, say Vande Bharat was, and still it's operational. We are also listening to through press, through media, there would be a changed world order. And the recent efforts by Indian government for pushing the vaccine shipments to the neighboring countries. And we have also seen orders coming in from the other parts of the globe, be it South Africa, Brazil, etc. So, how do you see India now playing a role at a macro level globally, especially generally and especially for the aviation industry? Over to you, Mr. Pathak.
Yeah, I think that the question which is you were asking that the before the COVID and the after the COVID change. What is the blunt which has been made, or what is going to be a opportunity for India? Am I right? I understood that.
Absolutely. Yes,
Okay.
please, Mr. Pathak.
Now we have to just look at the total aspects. First and foremost, the data which is showing the figure from April to September or April to October, where the downgraded the most of the major airport is almost around 35% minus. And if you look at the small airports, helipads and others, it has gone with the bracket of 60% minus. But if you look at the like a Delhi and the April to September has gone minus 38%. Bombay has gone 40% minus. Bangalore has gone 23% minus. But November has given a little hope. November onward, the hope is there where it is increasing by 5%. So the gap, which is the minus 35%, it has now come down to 31% or 30% the major metros. So that is the figure we have. So there's an improvement which is going after the November onward, and we hope because January is also not doing very well. But I think after Jan, because it's a holiday for most of the country, of the European country, and the also second break which took the place. Now the question is neighboring country where we are talking about vaccine supplies and exported. I think we must have to understand this vaccination is not going to be done in overnight. It is in the spread of 2 years minimum, 1 to 2 years. And so we have to spread the volume also accordingly. So it is not going to be big chunks. It may add only 2% what we are doing export percent, but it is not going to make a big shift, a big change in the market. And the presently the operation, because now the DGP have further extended the operation went till 20th February, until unless the belly operation comes, the deployment capacity is always going to be issue. Because whenever we operate the charter or when we operate cargo, converted aircraft to passengers, the both ways the cost is calculated. But unfortunately, the load is from one way. We are in transport business. Any transport business is always successful when you have a load from both sides. If you have a one-side load, it will never be successful. It is going to be a cost-effective only when you have a both-side load, which is not happening at the moment. Now the issue is that the import is not taking a place. It's only export. But certainly we have made a credibility in the market as India. When we talk about as India, that at the time of this, we have really shown our capacity, our capabilities to focus on many areas. We have given a pharma, the great supply of the pharma has gone during this period. And the pharma growth, which is we do around $20 billion pharma, and this year we have made a growth of 20%, which is a big growth. Despite the fact that this is a pandemic situation, we have created a growth of pharma market. And we have gone for USSR, the Russian markets very effectively, and this market we are using by air. So I think it's also given an opportunity to India to build up their credibility in the market and also to take further path. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pathak. So coming back to the technology side, so Mr. Saurabh Kumar, we have been seeing India, we are trying to create the hubs for the cargo movement via India. Like we have seen certain airports creating the transshipment centers. And where do you see we are today? And how do you see technology helping us to make it happen and become the hub for the Southeast Asian countries as far as air cargo is concerned? Over to you, please.
So this is a very strategic subject. We all know that India handles around 4 million, 4.5 million, metric tons of air cargo. And if we compare this on a global scale, this is very small, very small. And if you overlap the size of our economy, the size of our GDP and the population, these numbers look very small. There are, if we compare it with the top 5 cargo airports in the world, you'll find that as a country, the cargo that we handle may be lower than any one of them. So it brings out to the point, and that's why when I said it is strategic, that yes, it is. This is a long-term view. What technology is doing, and I don't want to talk alone about technology. It's technology coupled with innovation. Innovation need not always be technology, and that's why I'm using both the words. We what this is going to help us, and we as Indians and where we are as all the air cargo and the logistics stakeholder are moving in the right direction. This will help us bridge that gap. This will help us move faster in capitalizing on the opportunity for air cargo. Every economy, and the need and the demand and the consumption, being almost the same, the proportion of cargo that should move ideally in air should not be too divergent. If we compare, from a developing economy bracket perspective. And that is where I'm saying India has potential, not from doubling, but at least tripling our air cargo volume in say 1 to 2 5-year plan horizon. And this technology is going to help us move faster in that direction. I'll give you some examples where we are as a country we are moving very fast in aircraft. We are fastly adopting your community systems, the freight platform, freight community platform. Those are going to bring the stakeholder within an ecosystem, say for Hyderabad or across the geography, a particular kind of player, like all the freight forwarders coming together, or all the airlines coming together on a platform. So I think that's one trend to look at. The other trends are obviously in terms of the service levels, the visibility, the tracking, and the temperature, temperature solutions. I think that's the second area of technology. And the third area of technology is more in terms of automation and productivity improvement. I think both in terms of manpower, in terms of processes, these are some of the three areas in the technology front, and there are multiple initiatives being run at all levels, and including Hyderabad. And one example I want to give in terms of how we are planning to create dedicated freight corridors between two major locations. And we are trying that with Dubai in our very unique freight corridor, where we are just seamlessly integrating many of our systems, so that the customer sees a single face when the cargo transits from Hyderabad to another major hub like Dubai and onwards. And there are a lot of elements to it, but just keeping short, the three levers of technology that I said will help India to reach that 2 to 3, at least 3 times of that, wherein we would have realized some portion of the potential. PK, you're on mute, I understand. PK?
Sorry. Catchwords would be to create a scale of the volume for India and build up that integration of the technology, create the synergy among the stakeholders, and maybe some marketing to the other countries that what we can do for you. So with that, we will have to leave last 10 minutes for audience questions, if any. I have a lot of discussion points still for all of you. It was so interesting. But because of the time, I have to request Basundra if she has got any audience questions. So over to you, please, Basundra. You're on mute. You're on mute.
It happens all the time. I hope I'm audible now.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, clear.
So I said I was enjoying the wonderful exchange of thoughts, ideas, and knowledge, but we do have some audience questions that I would quickly like to address the esteemed panel with. So we have Mr. Meheryar Patel, who's the Group CIO Digital Solution at Jeena, whose question is, what are the next 3 months forecast and trends? So it's an open question. If any speaker from the panel would like to answer that, or maybe we can have inputs from everyone on this.
Forecast in terms of volume or what? Cargo volume increase.
Pathak, I think the next 3 months are very good. It's going to the air cargo business market. You see, I'm going to let me make a good open statement. Very controversial statement. Air cargo is cheap. Tell me how. Great controversy. Air cargo today when you cost of logistics in all commodities in India is 14%, where air cargo is 8%. Why is it 8%? Because the commodities that move it's up to 8. It's between 1 and 8%. So actually, air cargo is cheaper than a lot of modes of transport because the commodities that move in air cargo are um, far more expensive than by road and rail. So we are not going to compare ourselves by road, rail, or shipping companies.
So
Air cargo is 1%. In fact, people should be fighting for that 1% of global tonnage only moves by air cargo. So it is definitely a premium product and it has a great potential. Air cargo itself, you take mobile phones and Apple spends just 1% of it moves everything by air cargo, and it is only 1% spent because the high commodity price. Today, you talk, okay, let's go to the other extreme. Zara buying clothes for the general mass market 100% by air cargo. How do they manage that? So, air cargo, whether it's a Zara or an Apple, I'm giving you extremely two different commodities and two different price factors, but yet they find air cargo the best means of transportation to the goods. Today, air cargo is about safety, it's about speed. It's not about only cost. So let's open this topic and market air cargo not as an emergency product or as a penal product. It should be a product for supply chain. Toyota Motors, why would they move by air cargo? Supply chain, it has to be on time. They don't want inventory. Today, another factor, inventory cost, much higher keeping. Who wants to keep unsold goods in my warehouse as an inventory? I'd rather get it out in the market. Go fast to the market. Use air cargo. That's what the pitch should be, air cargo. Cost of finance, highly, a high cost of finance storing your goods, just lying around. This is where our air cargo has to play the difference. We do not want to compare to shipping or by road. We have to compare finance cost, inventory cost. All these are the costs which have to be taken in fact to air cargo. That's why I said air cargo is cheap. That's a statement I want to make. It's not expensive. Of course, controversial, but that's my personal feeling. I feel. Thank you very much.
Air cargo is
I,
just
Pathak, I got you thinking, huh?
it's just in. So the direct cost may be higher, but indirect cost is cheaper.
Absolutely. You have to see what's good for your product. You want to be before the competition, you have to use air cargo.
yeah, no, I think those are great words, and it's a sort of a call for action because you're right. I think a lot of people who market air cargo, we don't really market the real product, and that is the real product. It is the speed and it's the reduction in inventories and so on. But it's quite a difficult thing to sell, or more difficult, should I say, than just selling. My price is 50 rupees a kilo, and the other guy's 48. And we haggle away and all that. So
Really, if Amazon doesn't deliver before Tata or Reliance, they are going to lose the sale. Do you want to lose the sale or you want to use air cargo? That's what you have to talk about. You can't talk
Yeah.
about $50 a kilo. Your customer wants the goods. He wants it. Today, BMW wants to move spare parts, or Mercedes-Benz is moving spare parts to their distributors. They are very stodgy. That if you want to, the distributor tells you it takes 10 days. I'm an owner of a Mercedes. I don't want to wait 10 days to get a rear view mirror. No, I want it today fitted in my car. So
Yep.
everyone has to change the supply chain. Really, I'm sure you know about it. You can't when you go to a service center, you have to wait for your car part. Even today, no,
Yeah.
not acceptable. Okay, push air cargo.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
I got all excited. Sorry.
Yeah.
A good discussion. Very good discussion. Thank you for that.
Can I put it different way? If you go back around 2 decades back, the travel by air was a luxury.
True.
It is a need, and the need has gone into 2-tier and 3-tier cities, where the volume is much higher than the major metro. And the contribution from the IndiGo, the SpiceJet, and of course Air India, who has gone to smart 3-tier country and developed those markets, and with the competitive player, it has changed the whole thing. Similarly, requirement for the cargo also, because so far, let me put it very straight, even the airlines has not been bothered much about cargo, because it was just like a whatever coming with extra as a bonus. So that has to be taken care for.
Cyrus, one point on domestic cargo, and there's a big chunk of bulk movement which is overnight. And I would say that there is people find hardly any difference between using an IndiGo example or going by truck. And I often get people saying, okay, if this is not happening, let's take the truck and go. So the point is, this is on that borderline, and I'm talking about overnight domestic. Huge untapped opportunity. I think we just need to refine our approach and focus, and that big chunk of fence-sitting cargo will move. I think I particularly wanted to highlight the domestic, and it is grossly underutilized. Not 10-20%. It is really grossly underutilized.
Okay.
Yeah, indeed, a very interesting point of contention and very interesting points highlighted by Mr. Katgara, sir. So we have another question by Mr. Sanchit Gulati, who's the aviation consultant at ICF. His question is, do we have enough freight aircraft in India to handle internal demand? And with the change in the cargo landscape, do we see passenger to freight P2F conversions picking up steam here in India? This question was directed to Mr. William and Mr. Abhay, sir, but I would like to have the inputs of the other speakers as well.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate that India's most of the players in India, we do not have the freighter. There's only few freighter aircraft which is small size. Way back, I have recommended that we must have a 747 size of the freight in India. Because if we need to develop the export from India, we need to have infrastructure in place. You can't say that, all right, tomorrow volume will come, then only we'll bring the aircraft. You need to bring the aircraft and then operate. Otherwise, all of the airlines are coming from other part of the country and they're taking away your business. And if during this period of the COVID, if there was a freighter, we could have made the really change in the market. We could have really made the change in the market. So I think we need a freighter now. Very seriously, we have to think about it, not only for the international, but for also domestic. We need a freighter.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that you have to split it between domestic and international. I think domestically, certainly pre-COVID, the case for getting more freighter capacity into India's domestic market was pretty thin, in the sense that there is an awful lot of belly capacity, or there was. When we were flying all 240 odd aeroplanes, and the other airlines too. And obviously freighters, there are some freighters, but I think the case for adding freighter capacity at that time was quite thin domestically. And probably once we go back to normal, it'll still be, a little bit thin. But the big opportunity, as Mr. Pathak mentions, is international. I mean, it is a travesty in a way that there's so much foreign international capacity, freighter capacity coming into India and taking the export and of course the import market too, but particularly the export market out of India. You're seeing, the vast amount of capacity put on by people like Qatar, Cathay Pacific, Emirates, to an extent, Turkish. You can go on. The list goes on and on. And that's where probably the opportunity exists for Indian carriers going forward as the export market develops. I think one of the issues with it was that maybe 20, 30 years ago the export market out of India was relatively low, and what has happened as exports have picked up, and they still have a long way to go. I mean, India is a very self-sufficient economy compared to many large economies around the world, and the proportion of export is still quite low. But I think it will grow pretty fast, and we've seen recent figures showing that, both in pharma and engineering and a number of commodities. So I think that's going to be the opportunity for Indian carriers maybe to take freighter capacity.
Indeed, very perfectly summed up, and it is surely a promising trend for the coming months. Moving on to the next questions because we are slowly behind time. The next question is by Mr. Vipin Jain. He is the Chief Operating Officer at Delhi Cargo Service Center. Sir's question is, any comments on developing air cargo hub, as we have limitations to increase volume in India, and the same can be done by more GV with foreign carriers and Indian carriers? I would like to take Mr. Saurabh Kumar sir's comments on that. So, what do you want to offer, or what's your take on this?
So, I think very, very, very relevant point brought out by Vipinji. In fact, when we talk about air cargo hub, it is, I'm using the word JV, but it's more about partnership with anchor airlines. We cannot have a hub without a major port and a major anchor airline. Setting up a very efficient distribution centered around the location. And India, as we all know, our growth trajectory in air cargo has been slightly away from all the major locations, like Dubai, Hong Kong. You can take any major location. So if we need to move in that direction, it's very important but India is also very big and diverse country. So we will need to identify major locations which are naturally geographically strategic important. For example, maybe one in north and one in say south central, somewhere where the country can have a kind of a hub and spoke model. That's one part of it. And second, it's very right when we say that we will need to have an anchor airline. It's not necessarily it needs to be any foreign airline. It could also be an airline which comes up as homegrown airline. At least 2 or 3 major anchor airlines. And that's the missing link. That's the missing link between the potential that we have realized in air cargo and the potential that we actually have. So I think this will happen, and I'm very hopeful it will happen in the next 3 to 5 years.
Absolutely. Moving on, we have another question by Mr. Deepak Khanna, who is the VP Sales at Jeena and Company. What will be the trends on rates of air cargo in next 3 months? Will rates soften or firm up further? It's an open question to anyone who would like to.
Take that, you're the airline guy.
Well, no, I can't make forward-looking statements. So I would prefer not to. The market is the market. Let's see how it turns out.
Okay, we don't take.
I think it will solely depend on the demand and supply. See, price is always based on demand and supply. If we see the supply side going up and demand is not there, then rates may soften and vice versa. So nobody can really predict how it.
No, here is not that case which you are referring it. The case is over here. The government of India has banned till 28th February bringing any passenger aircraft. So that way, the belly, the capacity will not be there. At the same time, we all know very well after Jan, the market of cargo grows up because of the January it was totally holiday in European country and USA country, but it may not be trend the way it was in past, but it will grow. January, after January, February, March, it will be a big, big kind of volume. Provided that some more airlines come as a charter operator, then this may go down. Otherwise, it will go up. We are already up. Now, all depends whether the buyers are ready to take that cost because end of the day, the product from our country become a costlier in the competitive market if the freight is too high. Now we already in European countries, we already 4 times to 7 times more than what we were there. So today's scenario, the freight is already high. And will anybody be ready to take that freight further high or would like to now keep themselves close? Because most of the operator or the shippers, they're keeping quiet, not pushing the export because of the freight is too high. And the buyers are not ready to take that freight cost.
Right. So on that note, the next question by Gaurav Dubey from Logistics Insider. His question is, will vaccine actually give a boost to the air cargo business or is it just a buzz? Do you have any insights on that, Mr. Abhay Pathak?
It will give a credibility in the market. With that perception, other product in other country will be receptive for Indian product. But if you look at the volume increasing, it may go 4 to 5% extra. But certainly, giving a big credibility and big kind of a chunk of the perception changing in the international market, made in India or make in India.
True. And before we wind up the session, I'd like to request Mr. Katgara, Mr. Kumar, and Mr. William, sir, if you have any inputs on the final question on the vaccine, if it's going to actually give a boost to the air cargo business, or is it not?
Well, I think, as I said before, I think it is an absolutely critical mission for all of us in air freight, and I think we all understand our responsibility to make sure that the vaccines are put out in the best shape possible. But as I said, from a pure tonnage point of view, it's not massive, but it's a huge initiative for all of us, and we're taking it very, very seriously.
True, sir.
So,
Yes, sir.
So it'll improve the business confidence. It will help us become normal. But I think for air cargo, I want to highlight that it will enhance the capability of airline, airport, and all the stakeholders, and there'll be a lot of spin-off benefit for handling of other temperature-sensitive cargo like other pharma and perishable. It will help us because it's not vaccine which will be there for 5 years down the line, but this has helped all of us to enhance the capacity of this high-yield cargo as a stakeholder, and it will help us in the long run. It will help the air cargo.
Absolutely, sir. And to Cyrus, sir, any final remarks on that? Sir, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Yeah, I'd like to conclude by saying 3 cheers for air cargo. Air cargo has saved the world.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Indeed, sir. So I believe we have come to the end of today's session. As we reach the end of such a power-packed and engaging session, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the esteemed panel for such an invigorating experience. The fact that the year will bring about a wind of changes for the air cargo sector goes unsaid, including the unprecedented vaccine rollout, which will certainly emerge as the silver lining of the industry, as we all discussed. I extend my gratitude to our speakers for taking time off their busy schedule to make this session a grand success. Special thanks to Mr. Prediman Koul, sir, for moderating today's session to perfection. I'd also like to extend my gratitude to Jeena and company for powering today's session. Last but definitely not the least, my thanks to the viewers for their presence, support, and for their very inquisitive questions. And we hope that you found today's session to be enlightening as well. With this, I take my leave.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Thank you very
Thanks.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you
Bye.
so much, John.